Welcome back to Project Polls. In the previous lesson, we finalized unlevered taxes and calculated the unlevered after-tax project IRR. And now it's time to layer in debt, so we can move from project returns to the levered equity IRR, i.e. what equity actually earns once financing is in place. This lesson's focus is the foundation for everything that comes next. CFADS, cash flow available for debt service, and how we split it into contracted versus merchant CFADS for debt structuring purposes. If you're new to this Deal Lab series, I recommend starting with part 1, where you can download the model start file for free and build the model alongside me. Link is in the video description below. Now let's jump back to the model checkpoint file from our previous lesson. Before we can size debt or sculpt repayments, we need to define the exact cash flow the lenders care about, CFADS. By definition, CFADS is the cash flow that is available to pay interest and principal after covering the operating needs of the project. It's the key input for credit metrics like DSCR and LLCR, and it's ultimately what determines how much debt the project can safely support. And from a modeling standpoint, it's relatively easy to arrive at CFADS. All we have to do is pull in 3 metrics, and we'll start by pulling in our EBITDA. So that equals to our EBITDA that we have modeled in one of our previous lessons in row 399 under the unlevered pre-tax project IRR section. So pull in our EBITDA. Then from our EBITDA, which is also referred to as operating cash flow, we will have to subtract our major maintenance reserve account contributions. That is the cash that we set aside for our augmentations. It's not the actual augmentation expense, but the cash that we put aside in the separate account. So that equals to, let's scroll up, our MMRA is right here in row 373 onwards, and our MMRA contributions are in row 385, which are modeled positive, which means we have to flip the sign. So that is equal to minus 385. Hit enter. And then lastly, we will have to subtract our levered taxes. And in the previous lesson, if you recall, we modeled our unlevered taxes, meaning taxes before any financing. And our levered taxes we will model in the next session further down here, which means for now we just do a simple linkage to our levered taxes in row 504. And this row here we will model negative, which is why we just do a simple linkage for now. So that equals K504, hit enter, and CFADS equals simply the sum of these 3 items above. So our EBITDA minus MMRA contributions minus levered taxes. Hit enter, drag all of this over, Control R. And our EBITDA is essentially our revenue minus OPEX, so our operating cash flow. Then we have to subtract the cash that we have to save up for our augmentations. And obviously we'll also have to subtract our taxes. The reason why levered taxes are different from unlevered taxes is that in the levered scenario, our debt interest, our senior debt interest, as well as our interest on items such as our debt service reserve letter of credit, as well as the amortization of our financing fees, are all tax deductible. So that means that our financing helps to further reduce our actual tax bill. And that's why for the CFADS here we have to consider our levered taxes. So since we haven't modeled the taxes yet, our CFADS will be slightly overstated, but we will correct that in the next section. And in this case study, it's especially important that we split CFADS into 2 buckets. We distinguish between contracted and merchant CFADS. Contracted CFADS are cash flows tied to contracted revenues, which are typically more stable and more bankable. And merchant CFADS are cash flows exposed to market prices, which are more volatile, so lenders treat it more conservatively. And that's the reason why we have to split them up here. And to model this split, first thing we will do is pull in our CFADS only during our debt term. And that is going to be equal to our CFADS in 487 and then we'll multiply this with, let's scroll up, our actual term loan tenor flag in row 19. And right now this is 0, but we'll pull this in nonetheless. Hit F4 2 times, hit enter. Let's drag this over, Control R. And let's scroll up and see where K19 is coming from. And that is linked to our row 517. And just to demonstrate how the CFADS differentiation will actually take place, we will implement this flag for now. So this is going to be equal to an if and function, as we always set up our flags. And the first logical reason that needs to be fulfilled is that our start of period here in K5, anchor this 1, 2 times, is greater or equal to our tenor start date, which is in G517. That's when our term loan starts. Hit F4 1, 2, 3 times. And comma, the second condition that needs to be fulfilled is that our end of period, K6, hit F4 1, 2 times, is smaller or equal to our end of period for the financing in H517. Hit F4 1, 2, 3 times. So if these two conditions are fulfilled, close parentheses, then comma 1, otherwise comma 0, close parentheses, hit enter, drag this over, Control R, and that gives us our financing flag. Scroll back up, and now you can see that our CFADS during our debt term are now kicking in for 15 years only. Great. And now what we'll have to do is determine a contracted and uncontracted percentage. And for our contracted percentage, let's actually flip over to a case which has a mix of merchant and contracted revenues. So we'll just flip to case 8, where we have a mix of, let's go into our inputs time independent sheet, of an auxiliary service contract as well as merchant arbitrage, which you can see right here. This here is contracted capacity being 120 megawatt AC, as well as a merchant energy arbitrage assumption for case 8. So let's move back to the operations sheet. And for the contracted percentage, what we'll do is type in an if error statement in case we have to divide by 0. And then we scroll up and we take our contracted revenue in row 269. Right here, we differentiate between contracted and merchant revenue. So we take our contracted revenue and divide this by our total revenue in row 260. And since we divide by 0 here, that's why we want to make sure that we use an if error statement. Hit F4 1, 2 times. If that's an error, comma 0, close parentheses. And you can already see that in the next row, we actually have our merchant revenue. So we want to make sure that our total revenue is anchored and our contracted revenue is not, because that will allow us to drag this formula down, hit enter, copy this, paste it for our uncontracted percentage, Alt HVS F to paste it special, so we keep our formatting. Hit F2, let's scroll back up just to double check. And that is going to be our merchant revenue over our total revenue. Hit enter, drag this over, Control R. And this in total should always give us 100% in each period, which is the case. And then to calculate our contracted and uncontracted CFADS, that's fairly straightforward. So all we have to do is take our CFADS in row 490, hit F4 1, 2 times to only anchor to the row, and we'll multiply this with our percentage. First for our contracted percentage, and then in the row underneath for our uncontracted percentage. Copy this, paste it here, drag it over, Control R. Let's actually hit Control Z and Z again, and we paste this special, Alt HVS F, so we don't mess up our formatting. Drag it over again, Control R. And now we keep the formatting. And we can see that we have contracted CFADS of 141 million roughly and 44 million of uncontracted CFADS. And in total, that gives us our total 184.8 million in CFADS during our debt term. And these CFADS we'll use to later on structure our total debt volume in accordance with two different target DSCRs. One target DSCR for contracted CFADS and one target DSCR for uncontracted CFADS. And in the next lesson, we will model our levered taxes. Because once debt is in the capital structure, interest and the related items change taxable income. And we need that in place before we move into the debt sizing. Alright guys, this was it for this lesson, and I will see you in the next lesson. See you there.